Jason House owns Iridium Sports Agency, and this management company has over 100 UFC fighters on their roster. That's a lot. But Jason House, for all of his accomplishments, is one of the dirtier guys in the sport. Making videos on Ali Abdelaziz is sort of easy because he's too stupid to cover his tracks, and terrorism is flashy. Steroids and passports and lawsuits, oh my. Jason House, for all of his faults, is smart enough to stay out of the public eye, which makes him arguably more dangerous and impactful from within the shadows, which we're going to get to, but we have to start at the very beginning. We have to go way back to the late 2000s. Jason played college baseball for 4 years, went to law school while training MMA, and worked briefly as an intern at a different MMA management company before starting his own firm using a $2,000 loan from his father. This will be important later. Take notes. He started Iridium Sports Agency as a young man with a dream, and over the course of 20 years has grown it to be one of the most dominant forces in MMA management. But it wasn't easy, it sure as hell wasn't clean, and I would argue that it was barely legal. Dominance MMA and Ali Abdelaziz get a lot of shit because they have such a large portion of the roster and so many high-profile fighters under contract. Rightfully so, but they're only rocking around 15% of the UFC roster. Iridium has around 20, and I'm going to cover it in another video soon, but you combine these numbers with the numbers of the other 5 or 6 major MMA management companies, and this handful of firms controls about 85 to 90% of UFC fighters. As much as we talk about the UFC being a monopoly in the MMA promotional space, they also have seemingly limited the choice of manager to a select few that they have a good relationship with, which probably suppresses the price of the average contract, which is technically illegal. But I think as the company that makes up the biggest percentage of the roster, Jason House and Iridium in particular would benefit the most from this system. Jason House is a prime example, and I'm going to be using some older numbers from a channel called MMA. They made this video in January of 2023, and it's an excellent channel. Really, you should check it out. I mean, they were ahead by a significant margin on MMA managers being a problem and sports betting being a problem. Extremely smart guy. Check him out. He's linked in the description, as are as many sources as possible. His numbers from almost 3 years ago ended up showing that 17% of all Dana White's Contender Series winners were signed to Iridium. So it's not like the growth of Iridium is slowing down anytime soon, but the thing that really interests me from this video is the fact that matchmaker Sean Shelby got what seems to be a pretty warm welcome and a pretty extravagant little night out at a Miami nightclub. Now that sounds completely irrelevant until you realize that this is the type of welcome that would be put together by someone who cares for you, someone who's a really close friend. He's got his name up on the big screen and there's titties. This was set up by Jason House for Sean Shelby because that's what friends do. And I don't have any sources on this, but Sean Shelby also allegedly met his current girlfriend through Jason House's wife, and they all hang out pretty regularly. This is an open secret, and there's nothing really concrete there, but with the pictures of them together and the party, if you want to call it that, thrown by Jason for Sean, it begins to paint a picture of an old boys club, you know? And we already kind of knew that that was the case, but now we know with more certainty than before that it also includes managers and not just UFC staff. Everyone is schmoozing all of the time. But even worse than schmoozing is pretending that you're not schmoozing. Jason House is always doing podcasts. He's on a perpetual podcast tour. Like he did a puff piece with the Jackson Podcast Boys. That wasn't too far back. And there's this specific clip where Bear really just misinterprets the claims that many MMA fans have regarding Jason House, and he blew smoke up his ass the whole rest of the interview. But this here really just felt forced and felt like a way to kind of damage control some of the allegations and some of the implications that Jason House brings along with him. Here's the quote. Jason House owns Iridium, and every 1 out of 2 fighters is signed to Iridium. So basically, half of all your checks you kick back to Dana to make sure all your fighters get fights. Because I've never seen an agency get their fighters so many fights in my life. They get more work than a bunch of referees combined. I love Iridium. They make sure that morals and ethics are at an all-time high. Paraphrasing a bit, but unlike Bear and his mock skit, conversation, recorded puff piece thing, I'm not misrepresenting what's being said here. Having such a large amount of the UFC roster under your control can, I guess, be a good thing, but sport-wise, it just ends up forcing fighters to join other big management companies that are already seemingly somewhat in bed with the UFC, right? So Jason will constantly chalk that up to him just making sure that his fighters are ready for opportunities and that he's willing to fairly negotiate with the UFC. Are other people not ready? Are other people not willing to negotiate? Was that the magic secret, Jason? This whole time, Lerone Murphy could have got a title shot. If only he would have just stayed ready and his manager would have been willing to fairly negotiate. That was the problem? It doesn't seem like rocket science, and it doesn't seem like something that only Jason House would be capable of. Maybe being friends with the matchmakers would impact the matchmaking of the fighters you manage? I don't know, just spitballing. In Jason's Reddit Ask Me Anything, and in other interviews as well, he's always talking about how Iridium is a family, and managers do more than just business. He always wants to sell himself as more than just a guy who does contract stuff. Everything's about family with these people. This is not a Fast and Furious movie. This is not Olive Garden. Get out of here with that. We know you're here to just negotiate deals and do money shit. Like, don't try and sell me on something you're not. You know, one example that he'll bring up pretty often is him being an errand boy. He, of course, has never given a real-world example of this, but he always talks about hypothetically picking up a fighter's family from the airport, or helping a fighter cut weight, or cleaning up their house, or whatever. Pretty vague stuff. Anything to make it seem like he's a friend and not just a manager. It's really weird. But there's never any names attached, and it's said in a way where, like, he would do this if someone asked him, but no one's asked him yet. He's just chomping at the bit to help his clients pick people up from the airport. And things just don't seem to check out with this guy, and maybe you could correlate it with some of his friends and family, like perhaps his longtime friend, James Krause. James Krause, the Kansas City Metro PCS owner? After the 2022 UFC betting scandal, James Krause was seemingly exiled from the sport. But you do some digging, and up until mid-2024, he was still in charge of Jason House's real estate business, despite the company saying that they got rid of him immediately after the betting scandal. And word on the street is, despite Jeff Molina and Jason House having stated multiple times that James Krause is completely divorced from MMA and doesn't even know how to spell mixed martial arts. Ever since this betting scandal, he was at an MMA event last year, and he was training the same month. Like, we have pictures. We have videos. We've seen him. He's not as separate from MMA as these people would have you believe. And he was still in contact with Mark Montoya of Factory X as of February. Right? Word on the street again is that he's still coaching, but everything's kept on the down low, and I can't really confirm that. But it's rumor, it's innuendo, it's how we roll around here. Pretty much everyone involved in the UFC's two betting scandals of the last half decade are all connected to Jason House and Iridium. Right? You got Krause, Minner, Molina, Dolgarian, and then a bunch of fighters who claimed that they were approached to throw fights but didn't end up doing it. Morales, Demopoulos, Charez, 2 out of 3 retracted their statements. Vanessa deleted her comments. And Vince Morales, despite talking to multiple different media members giving a pretty detailed account of the encounter, talking about how he was approached on a casino floor in Vegas during COVID, giving times, giving dates, what he was wearing, all of it. Very specific. And then he said, nope, actually the whole thing was just a joke. It was just a joke that got out of hand. That's what you told a bunch of media people? It wasn't a single throwaway tweet, it was a series of tweets, a series of deletions, and a striking from the record. I go into it a little bit more in detail in my betting scandal breakdown video, but Iridium is the factor that ties all these people together, so it is strange that no fighters from other management companies came out of the woodwork claiming that they were approached at least once. No other people. It's not even like, oh, well, it's 90% Iridium and then there's 10% of these people. There was no one else. And again, these Iridium people are so strange because you got lower level managers that deal with other problems. Joe Wooster works as another manager, and he also runs FAC, a regional promotion in Missouri, a promotion where James Krause was the previous owner until they kicked him out, but he's still there, he's still hanging around. Here he is at the company in February. This is also on UFC Fight Pass, and this doesn't really make sense because managers being matchmakers isn't anything new, but it's still less than stellar, and a promotion that's only had 32 events in close to 7 years of being on Fight Pass is strange, especially when every single event is held in Missouri. This isn't a big regional promotion. This is a small promotion, the type of promotion that the UFC doesn't really go for. This is an outlier, unless it was put on Fight Pass as a favor, because this promotion is so interconnected with Iridium and its staff and its fighters. Maybe it's not criminal, but it's still favoritism, I guess. Speaking of criminal, what a segue. Jason House also has a record. Ooh, yippee, it's my favorite part of the video. Now, it's the holiday season. Thanksgiving was hectic, and I'm sure that Christmas will be more of the same. But even though a lot of you have potentially tumultuous relationships with your family, I personally ran through my home like the Tasmanian devil, no one was safe. Jason House is so antsy, he doesn't even wait for the holidays. So in August of 2021, Jason and his family go on down to the 1880 Grill. Seems like a nice enough restaurant, but then they talk business and things fly off the handle. See, when Iridium's operations moved from California to Nevada, after Jason House was told by Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard that if he moved there, they'd be able to give him more opportunities, that's a real quote, Jason's father, who gave him the initial investment all those years ago, I hope you were paying attention, felt like his son was going to lessen his stake in the company. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know if you can change the amount of stake someone has in a company when it moves locations. I don't know if that's a thing, but his father really felt like he was going to get screwed out of his 20%. They start yelling at each other, and Jason hits what I assume to be a very dramatic point at his stepmother, saying, "This is all your fault." Jason's father then batted away Jason's finger with cat-like reflexes, because pointing is rude, so Jason stands up out of the booth, assumes what is described as a fighting stance by all the onlookers because he's making a scene, and then throws a flurry of punches at his father at the 1880 Grill. I looked at the Google reviews for the 1880 Grill, and a lot of people said that the salmon was highly recommended, but the only thing being served when Jason was there was vengeance. He and his wife make a swift exit, and Mr. House is taken to the hospital where he needs a bunch of stitches and a blood transfusion. It's what many are calling the perfect crime. We later got more information from Jason House's brother, and apparently they had had multiple conversations in the month prior where Jason said that he wanted to punch or knock out his father as soon as he saw him. We're lucky that they even got to sit down. You think your family's bad? Then you obviously haven't been invited into the house. The 1880 Grill has these weird chairs as well. The man couldn't even defend himself because of these stiff booths. If I didn't know any better, I would say that Jason invited his family to this restaurant for that very reason. Jason was able to scout this place, and being more athletic, was able to get in and out of the seating arrangement in a much easier manner. This was an ambush, a setup even. For legal reasons, that's a joke, but it's still a weird scenario to find yourself in as a grown-ass man with kids and a family and a business. So Jason House is willing to do dumb shit, and my favorite example of this is when he ruined a poor young lady's evening. Let me explain. Now keep in mind, I don't care about country music at all. I barely know these people, but apparently they're celebrities. Zach Bryan and, checks notes, Brianna Chicken Fry, that's not a real name, had a messy breakup, and Brianna went to UFC 309 as a celebrity guest. But because Zach Bryan is friends with Jason House, Jason got his fighters, Jonathan Martinez, Basil Hafez, and David Onama, to all walk out to Zach Bryan songs. And David Onama shouted out Zach Bryan on the mic after he won, all to torment this poor girl after a bad breakup or something. Hello? Geneva Convention? Yeah, I think we need to make an amendment. Lex Luthor levels of pettiness going along with something this petty. I mean, the average mind just can't comprehend this kind of thing, man. Even something like the way that Iridium fighters come about their opportunities can sometimes come into question. Malcolm Wellmaker needs an opponent. Here's Ethan Ewing. Both of them are managed by Iridium. This feels weird because how can you look out for the best interests of both guys? In the same way that it would be bad if the same coach coached both fighters in a fight, how do you separate this in a way that's comparable to two different teams of people behind each of their fighters? Especially when, like what we talked about earlier, Jason is also really friendly and supposedly wants to pick up people's families from the airport and stuff of that nature. How do you distribute your energy evenly on that front? Do you take notes? Do you say, well, I cleaned up this guy's garbage twice, so that's equivalent to driving around this guy for an hour or whatever? Like, how do you run those numbers? The obvious answer to all of these questions is that you can't. I feel like that's pretty simple and pretty logical. Like, you gotta trust your gut on these kinds of things. And for me personally, it makes me feel a bit iffy. Going into an MMA fight, the only people who should know something that the fans don't are fighters and coaches. When the UFC knows things, and when managers know things, these people are in positions of power. They control the matchmaking. They have the sort of advantage, and they can put together fights where different fighters that maybe they like have a slight edge. That's a real possibility. And I think that's probably also an issue that ends up compromising the legitimacy of the sport. In the same way that a betting scandal makes us feel like, oh, we don't know what's real and what's not real. The UFC picking favorites and having insider information, and managers pitting their fighters against each other, potentially having insider information, also has a similar effect where we don't know what's being tampered with or what has been said behind closed doors or whatever, anything of that nature. So why do big journalists not want to talk about this? This feels like a slam dunk for someone like an Ariel Helwani who spares no expense in trying to come after the UFC. Well, Ariel Helwani in his interview with Jason House said that Iridium's PR guy will text Ariel right after one of their fighters wins and ask Ariel if he wants to have him on the show. You're going to get an exclusive interview withheld from you if you don't go along with these managers. It's not worth it to kick up dirt like this when you don't have to. That's the simple answer as to why stuff like this doesn't get covered. It's not easy. But I hope after all the information we've accumulated and all the speculation we've done today, that you can come away from this video knowing more than the average bear. That's the goal, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know your thoughts on Jason House in the comment section below. Here's a playlist of more videos like this that I think you'll enjoy. Like, comment, and subscribe for more MMA content. Shout out to Proletarian Gothic, Vanny, and Stu for being vampiric enjoyers, and become a member today to get your name read out just like them. Thank you all so much for watching. The house always wins. Have a good time.